Let's go ahead and dig into chapter 6. Most of the boys didn't bother with excuses after that. They just ran. A few of the older boys seemed to suspect something was up, but they still left, murmuring their doubts. They could be a problem later, but at least there was some room to breathe now. That was the biggest display of stupidity I have ever seen, May said. Before he could respond, the sound of hoofbeats made them both look up to find Jack's grandfather walking down the path toward them, a tray full of food in one hand and the reins of a horse in the other. And then Jack took a good look at the animal and realized it wasn't a horse at all. It was easily the most evil, horrible monster he'd ever faced. "Watch out, Grandpa, that thing's a killer," Jack shouted, his voice cracking in terror. "Oh, calm down," his grandfather said. "Samson here probably won't bite, assuming you don't get him all riled up like you did the last time. George said we could borrow him if we needed him to help the princess." "It didn't just want to bite me," Jack said quietly, stepping back. "It's been waiting to kill me for years now, biding its time until we were alone. If there was a meaner, nastier animal within 100 miles, George's horse would have run it down out of spite, eaten it, then maybe stuffed it as some kind of trophy." All that stood between Jack May and the death by trampling were the thin leather reins held in his grandfather's naive hands. "Did I miss something here?" the old man asked, nodding at Robert's unconscious body. "Not much," May said. "Just a mob of boys fighting over who could marry me." "In other words, nothing special," Jack agreed, still eyeing the horse. The horse stared right back, following Jack's every move with his dark, dead eyes. "By the way, I wanted to thank you for telling the entire town about the princess." The old man coughed to cover his blush. "Yes, well, sometimes words slip out," he said. "Sorry about that." Jack rolled his eyes. "Slip out? Sounds like you've been shouting about her from the rooftops. Anyway, we should get out of here before Robert wakes up. If the other boy sees he's still alive, things are going to get ugly." "Things already look ugly," Jack's grandfather said, tapping Robert with his foot. The boy moaned slightly at the touch. "Whoops," the old man said quietly. "Get on the horse. Hurry now." "I'm not getting on the horse," Jack whispered, his anger rising with his fear. "Quit being a baby," May said to Jack, and walked up to the horse. "You're not mean, are you, buddy?" she said to Samson. Samson turned his gaze on the princess, and May immediately took a step back, shivering in the cold evening air. "I think it wants to eat my face off," she said quietly. "It's nothing personal," Jack told her, pulling her away from the monster. "It wants to do that to everyone." At that, Jack's grandfather grabbed his bag from Jack's hands. "You two are both pathetic. Still, I've got just the thing." He reached deep within the bag, all the way to his shoulder, despite the fact that the bag was only large enough to fit his arm up to the elbow. May's eyes widened at the magic, while Jack just tapped his foot impatiently. Finally, his grandfather smiled in triumph and pulled out what looked to be a horse's bridle. Only this bridle was made out of flowers, daisies to be specific. "Years ago," the old man said, handing Jack the flower bridle, "I was kidnapped by shoemaking elves. That was back when I was working as a cobbler, and making a good living at it too, I might add. In fact, my shoes were the reason the elves took me prisoner. They were jealous. Eventually, I got to be friendly with one of the captors, a little elf woman named Mariella. She helped me escape by giving me one of the elves' magic bridles, capable of taming even the wildest beast." He smiled widely. "Had to use it on a frog the first time, actually. Did I mention they shrunk me to the size of an apple? Amazingly, the bridle grew with me when I turned back to normal, but that's another story." "I've heard it," Jack said, eyeing the horse, then the bridle. At this point, he wasn't sure which was worse. Magic was all well and good when it worked, but it had a tendency to go wrong just when you needed it the most. Say, for example, when you were trapped on the back of a devil horse. On the ground, Robert moaned again, and Jack realized they didn't exactly have a choice. He sighed, took the bridle, and planted his feet facing Samson. He took a deep breath and held the bridle out between his hands, then thrust it at the horse's mouth. Samson immediately opened his jaws to bite one of Jack's hands, but Jack quickly jerked them to the side, so Samson bit down on the flower bridle instead. Immediately, the beast froze completely, although his cold, dead eyes still glared at Jack. "Huh," Jack said, honestly impressed that the bridle actually worked. "I've seen that story a million times in the storybook, but I still thought you were making it up." "Shows what you know," his grandfather told him, helping May onto the unmoving horse. After she was up, the old man handed Jack the bag. "Take this, too." "What is that, anyway?" May asked. "Ah," Jack's grandfather said, lighting up. "It's a magic sack, princess. No matter what you put in it, it'll never weigh you down or fill up. It's also where I keep my most treasured magical items. May they come in handy on your trip. He threw Jack a look. That includes one of your father's beans, by the way. Try not to eat that. Come the morning, you'd have more than indigestion. Thanks, Jack said, as he leapt onto the horse behind May. Are you going to be okay here alone? I'll be fine. Get out of here, his grandfather said, eyeing the growing crowd of boys standing on the path back to town. And try not to mess this up, huh? Thanks for the optimism, Jack said, then shook the reins. Samson immediately began to walk, then trot. All the boys in town knew enough to stay out of the horse's way, but several of the boys threw Jack dirty looks as the horse approached. And then, just as Jack and May passed by a large group of boys, an angry voice yelled out from behind them. Hey, what's going on here? Robert yelled. You tricked me, Jack. Get him, guys. A loud honk shut Robert up, as Jack's grandfather smacked him with the food tray. But it was already too late. Jack kicked Samson into a gallop, and off they went down a path, a screaming mob of boys right behind them. I wonder if the boys will catch up or if they'll get away. Stay tuned to listen to Chapter 7.